Imagine a world where you could make this sound like this. Well, with the Magic S23A board you can. I'm Will, and this is another episode of RetroTechBytes. Before we get to that, let's talk a little about this. This is the AOPEN AW35. It's a very simple sound card using a Crystal CS4237B, and yeah, it has Sound Blaster Pro compatibility, it's a 16-bit ISA card, you know the drill, nothing special. But as you see, I have my Sound Blaster S2 mounted on it, and that gives it MIDI capabilities. This is, courtesy of Shop, the world's purveyor of these things at the moment. A MIDI synthesizer that fits, well, more than into the palm of your hand. Quite a small board and offers a lot of really cool features, and there's plenty of other videos out there about it. I'll link them in the description. But the point is, yeah, let's say you have one of these, but you don't want to go the extra mile of having something that makes your card thicker, and you just don't feel like messing with a wavetable. Well, at least not on a wavetable header. That's where the other card comes in. So let's go back to that for a minute and take a look. Alright, let's talk about this strange sound card we have here. Why do I say strange? Well, first of all, the AOPEN AW32 Pro variant of this card was, well, a weird card. And I say weird because, well, what you see here is pretty standard. You have CS4236 by Crystal, and that provides Windows Sound System, Sound Blaster Pro 2, and Crystal FM synthesis, which is essentially an OPL3 clone. It also has a Crystal CS9233, which we'll talk more about later, but basically that's a MIDI synth. So you have your MIDI, you have your OPL3, you have your Sound Blaster compatibility, and you have Windows Sound System in one package. The AW32 Pro, by comparison, was the same 16-bit ISA card. It was the same essential idea, but the main difference lay in the fact that it used a Crystal CS4232, which instead offers Sound Blaster Pro 2, it offers Windows Sound System, and it offers no Crystal FM. So where did the FM synthesis come from? Well, on that card, it actually came from the MIDI synth. Go figure, right? Yeah, it sounds weird. Unfortunately, I don't have one to sample, but we're going to take a look at this and see how it sounds. So yeah, this is a really weird card, and it's got a lot of unique features, so let's start talking about some of them. This ain't your average 16-bit ISA card, that's for sure. So yeah, this card is kind of interesting because of that CS9233. So let's take a look at it. The CS9233 produced by Crystal is probably equivalent to the Dream SAM9233. The reason I say probably equivalent is because it's a licensed copy. I can't confirm whether or not there are any changes, but it seems that they seem pretty much the same. For the most part, this is a standard MIDI synth, with the CS4112CS operating as a 1 MB sample ROM from which the CS9233 plays. The sample ROM, though, is controversial to say the least. The reason being is that this actually predates the Dream Clean Wave sample set used on things like the Dream Blaster S2 that I talked about earlier. When I say predates it, what does that mean? Well, there's a reason they called it Clean Wave. This actually contains what appear to be reverse engineered or copied versions of the Roland SoundCanvas sample ROM. Pretty much, it sounds like Dream digitally recorded the Roland SoundCanvas and copied the instruments back into the CS4112. Well, at least when Crystal produced it. The CS4112 has a 1 MB sample set that's heavily compressed, to say the least. But it does sound notably similar to the Roland SoundCanvas, especially when paired with the CS9233. This was not around very long, and yeah, it ended up in a number of lawsuits. Actually, there's one device that used this exact setup that was the centerpiece of a very, very heated lawsuit between Roland and Atmel Dream. So, yeah, not exactly ideal in terms of the history of sound cards. This thing's rather infamous for that perspective. But it offers some pretty cool sounds, so let's take a look at it. We'll first talk about the history, and for those of you who aren't interested, I'll put a link down here in the description, or on the video in this case. And yeah, you feel free to skip to the gameplay because there'll be plenty of it. But yeah, stick around and let's check out this card. Why is it so strange? And is there any reason to consider something like this over perhaps, the standard CS4237 with a Dream Blaster S2 on it, or, a Dream Blaster X2 or whatever you got? Well, you might be surprised. Our story today begins and ends with this little thing. The MIDI-Man G-Man, a MIDI synth designed to compete with the likes of the Roland SoundCanvas itself. The MIDI-Man G-Man was supposed to be smaller and more affordable, and used as such crystal components. And as you can see here, the same CS9233CQ on our sound card and CS4112 ROM set. Apparently, in 1997 it came to light that Atmel Dream, or Dream at the time for the sake of simplicity, was actually copying the Roland SoundCanvas sample set. How? It was using a digital sampler in order to reverse engineer and copy the sounds and compress them to make its own ROMs. So what happens when you go toe-to-toe with a company like Roland that's famed for its musical excellence throughout the years? Well, you get a big fat lawsuit, that's what, and that's exactly what came Dream's way. Now, Dream had actually settled this suit before the suit that I'm showing you took place, and yeah, the suit that I'm showing you was actually a collateral insurance claim. No matter, the fact remains, some of the facts integral and discussed within that case itself are pretty interesting and worth taking a look at. Namely, first, that Dream itself actually stipulated to copying the Roland SoundCanvas sample set. That's right, they actually admitted to copying Roland's own sounds. Weirdly enough, Roland seemed to sit on their hands and didn't do anything despite having actual knowledge of this issue. In fact, a Roland representative reportedly saw and heard the MIDI-Man G-Man, and, well, they decided not to do anything about it. In fact, apparently they instructed MIDI-Man on how to properly display the Roland GS trademark on the front of the unit. Just a side note, when they're talking about issues like latches or conduct or estoppel here, what they're actually referring to is Roland knew about this and didn't do anything. And that's probably the weirdest part of this case. This device is controversial because Roland didn't want it produced, and yet they knew about it being produced and actually helped the people producing it. That makes no sense, but hey, that's business. So yeah, the CS9233 was sold as a GS-compatible system. In fact, you can actually see it on the datasheet right here. It's basically just a MIDI synthesizer that uses Roland sample sets, and for the most part, it sounds close, not exact, to a Roland SoundCanvas. So what Roland actually claimed was that the device had violated their copyrights, namely their sounds. In the end, as is all too common, the case was settled outside of court, and Roland walked away just as happy as Dream did, because Dream was able to move on and produce the Cleanwave. Dream Cleanwave products actually use Dream-made sample sets that are compatible with the general MIDI standard. Note that the SAM9733 from Dream here doesn't display the Roland GS logo. In fact, there's actually a notice at the bottom of the datasheet referring to the Roland copyright dispute and saying that use of the GMS 960800B, or a general MIDI compatible product that was also GS compatible, would be a violation and amount to liability for infringement, presumably upon the trademarks of Roland Corporation. With Roland happy about winning its copyright suit, even though it didn't really win, it just settled the suit, it walked away feeling confident that it had exerted a claim such that it was able to get its competitors to acknowledge the validity of its copyright in its digital sound recordings. How strange is that? Literally, a whole new field of law emerged from this case, and yet it's relatively low profile. Either way, regardless, Dream was able to move on and produce devices like the SAM9733, which was used in the Turtle Beach Yucatan FX, or also the Reptile Paradise Cancun FX, if you're a fan of Certashop. Both devices provide what sounds to be a Roland SC55 compatible, or close to it, sound set, but they actually don't use Roland patches. They use Dream-made samples. So in the end of this short but weird tale, it all comes down to this. Dream actually admitted that it copied Roland sound recordings using a digital sampler, and it got away with it. Even though it ended up settling out of court and paying damages, the fact remains, Dream was able to produce a product that was GS compatible, and Roland, for the most part, didn't care for quite a while. And yeah, when they started caring, by then it was too late to matter, because Dream had moved on and produced the Cleanwave patch set. And the Dream Cleanwave patch set sounds pretty good. In fact, that's what's used on devices like the Dream Blaster X2, the Dream Blaster S2, and all of the products that Certishop makes that use a Dream chip. And so but goes this weird and interesting tale. Anyway, let's check out some gameplay and see how this card actually sounds. After all, it is a Roland SoundCanvas clone on a card, isn't it? First up, from 1995, we have Rise of the Triad. Essentially the A-Team if it were a video game. Let's take a listen to this game's fantastic MIDI soundtrack. We'll transition between Crystal FM and the general MIDI provided by the CS9233 and see which one sounds better. At a certain point, it's just a no-brainer. The CS9233 is clearly the superior chip for this game. The fact remains, though, that this isn't really a Roland SoundCanvas. Sure, it sounds fantastic, but compared to the SC55, it's a little more flat and compressed sounding. That's not to say it's bad, it's just different. Next up, in the stream of weird shooters with great MIDI soundtracks, we have Heretic from 1994. Published by id Software, this game provides a fantastic MIDI soundtrack that's dark and ominous. Let's see how the CS9233 handles the sounds in general MIDI. Let's kick it back another year to 1993 and take a listen to Doom's soundtrack. At Hell's Gate is probably one of the better known MIDI soundtracks from most games, even if you haven't heard MIDI soundtracks at all. And yeah, on this card it sounds pretty good. At a certain point, it's very clear that the 1 MB sample ROM is probably the limitation on this card. That being said, it doesn't sound bad, just different than the SoundCanvas. Taking a break from all these shooters, let's take a listen to Tyrian's soundtrack. We'll flip between Crystal FM and the CS9233 again, and here, yeah, both really do shine. Crystal FM is notably flabbier than true OPL3, and the CS9233 has some hits and misses, but overall it sounds pretty solid. Do note, this isn't a perfect solution though. Take a listen to Monkey Island. The MT32 sounds are notably off. And like other Dream-based chips, it seems to have a problem in descent. Clearly the audio is peaking much like it did in Monkey Island, and this just seems to be a limitation of the card. So, for those of you looking for a decent wavetable card, I can wholeheartedly recommend the Magic S23A Board. It's a compelling alternative to things like the Roland SoundCanvas in that it provides a 1MB sample ROM that's deep, rich, and punchy on the bass, but not too over the top. It does have some downsides, notably that it can't handle MT32 emulation at all, and that, well, some games like Descent are just essentially broken unless you use the Dream patches. This just tends to be an issue with Dream-based hardware, and yeah, it's one of those things that you just live with at a certain point. While the Magic S23A isn't really a Roland SoundCanvas on a board, it's certainly a compelling alternative. In a world where cards like the Grabus Ultrasound are commanding a premium and the Roland SoundCanvas itself is quite pricey these days, cards like this are there to bridge the gap. While it may not be as good as Certico's MIDI daughter boards, it's an all-in-one solution, and yeah, the Sound Blaster support's pretty good, so in sum, it's probably fair to say that this card is, well, but if you run across one, it's definitely worth a second look. And this has been another episode of RetroTechBytes. Thank you very much for watching and for all of your support.